At 39 years old, coming off Tommy John surgery, Justin Verlander just won the third Cy Young of his career. Now, is he a fit to replace Jacob deGrom in the Mets rotation? That's what we'll be discussing on today's edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Justin Verlander just put together a remarkable season, and he was rewarded by winning his third Cy Young. Really kind of his second in his last, 3 years pitching. If you go back to 2019, that was the last time he won the Cy Young. And then in 2020, pitches one game, gets hurt, goes under the knife for Tommy John, misses all of 2021, signs back with the Astros on a short-term deal that allows him to hit free agency again after the 2022 season. And then he goes out and he leads all of baseball with a 1.75 ERA, 28 starts, 175 innings pitched, struck out 185. His ERA plus led all of baseball at 2.20. That's a stat that measures pitchers based on a league average of 100. So he was 120% better than your league average pitcher. His whip was the best in all of baseball at 0.829. Hits per nine was the best in the American League at just 6 allowed. Unbelievable success for Justin Verlander, and to do it at his age, to do it coming off Tommy John, to then go into the playoffs. And granted, he didn't have the most success in October. If you really were to grade out the starters on the Astros that led to that World Series victory, Framber Valdez, probably the number one guy you would look at for what he did in that World Series and prior. Christian Javier had some big moments, but ultimately Justin Verlander still was able to take the ball deep into the season, go all the way through a playoff run, and here he is looking to cash in free agency. So that leads me to the question of what would he look like on the New York Mets? I've already seen a little bit of pushback from fans about the notion of the Mets signing Justin Verlander, and we'll get to my reservations next, but the idea that you are against it based on the playoff numbers, right? We all know. Justin Verlander World Series, we saw it. It's not a good track record for him. In his career in the World Series, 5.63 ERA, 9 starts. Finally got a win. And what was it? Game 5, if I'm not mistaken. But you look at the other playoff success over his career, ERA right about 3 in both the ALDS, the ALCS in his career, 3.08 in 79 innings in the ALDS, 3.01 in the ALCS. But again, because of that World Series start, I've seen some fans say we don't want Justin Verlander. Well, this year, Justin Verlander, when it comes to FWAR, third most valuable pitcher behind Carlos Rodon and Aaron Nola. When it comes to the ERA, I already said best in baseball. The expected ERA, 2.66, that's dynamic. 2.49 FIP, one of the best in baseball. His xFIP right up there as well at 3.23. The FIP was the fourth best mark in baseball. The xFIP at 3.23. I have to go down the list a little bit, but it comes in at 11th. This is still one of the best pitchers in baseball. He's got the fastball velocity was averaging at 95 this year. You look at all of the advanced metrics. You look at the percentile rankings. Expected slugging percentage, he's in the 82nd percentile. Expected batting average, 83rd percentile. Expected ERA, 91st percentile. Strikeout rate good, walk rate good. Fastball velo still in the upper 25% of the league. Chase rate still in the upper 25% of the league. Curveball spin, upper 25. I mean, however you want to look at it, Justin Verlander is an elite pitcher, and he still has the 4-pitch mix: fastball, slider, curveball, changeup. Although he barely throws that changeup, really it's fastball, slider, curveball, and he gets guys out, and he still knows how to pitch. So before we talk about specific fit, before we go through kind of what we're looking at as far as a contract and where else he could land, Justin Verlander can absolutely be the co-ace with Max Scherzer in this rotation. I think when we go through years, that's where we can have some apprehension. But if you're simply talking about the 2023 rotation, I've said it before, I'll say it again. The Mets have to land one of Jacob deGrom, Justin Verlander, or Carlos Rodon. I think Carlos Rodon is the guy that will get the most years, and you can look at that one of two ways. You can say, wow, he could be a fixture for a long time, still in the early 30s, so you can expect a lot of good performance. Or you could think, scary injury history to give this guy a 5-6 year deal. Jacob deGrom, we've gone through that a bunch. It's a matter of years with him, and ultimately I still think that's the most likely scenario. But Justin Verlander is still a really nice option. Again, ERA, all right, earned run average throughout a season, 28 starts. How can you sniff at a 1.75 ERA? How can you look at that and think that Justin Verlander would be anything but dynamic in a Mets uniform next year? He would be. He really would be. And the fit is obvious in the sense that who wouldn't want a guy that's going to be a Hall of Famer? And look, to go through the career, not that I need to kind of read off what he has done, because you all know he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but won the Rookie of the Year. He won his first Cy Young when he had the pitching triple crown in 2011, 2.40 ERA, 251 innings pitched, 250 strikeouts. Following year, finished top 3, runner-up in Cy Young. 2009 was the first time he finished the top 3, I should have mentioned, finishing 3rd. Again later on in 2016, runner-up in the Cy Young. Then he was the runner-up in 2018, and then won it in 2019. Guy is ridiculous. Him and Scherzer have been trading off on the all-time strikeout list. It'd be crazy if they could do that together in a Mets uniform next year. But it all comes down to years with him and dollar amount. I just had to, on the front end, read off a list of bona fides that you should all kind of understand. But I wanted to still give them to you because I've seen, again, some fans on social media, which doesn't mean anything, or everything, I guess I should say, sort of poo-poo the idea of Verlander coming to the Mets. And look, it would be an incredible signing if they pulled that off. It's just maybe not the best signing that they could make because I still like Jacob deGrom, but we'll go through that comparison in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. The numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. And at SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I know because I use SimpliSafe in my own home. They protect you with cutting-edge security, powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back, making me feel a lot safer whenever I leave the house because they'll call you the moment a threat is detected and they'll dispatch police or first responders in event of an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras inside and outside your home with smarter ways to detect motion that only alerts you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Now, is Justin Verlander a better fit than Jacob deGrom? It really comes down to the years. And here's something that we learned either today or yesterday as it relates to Verlander's free agency that would once again push me closer towards saying Jacob deGrom. He wants the Scherzer contract. The 3 years, the $130 million. And look, he has every right to demand it, considering the season that he just had. But the years, He's going to be 40 by next season. So you're paying for age 40, 41, and 42. Now, can Justin Verlander pitch into his 40s? Absolutely. He wants to pitch until he's 45. He said that in the past. I would not doubt his ability to do that. But paying him and Max Scherzer both in their, late 30s for Scherzer, early 40s for Verlander, I mean, the 3 years thing is what gets me. If it's 2 years, I'm more on board. Maybe it's a third year that can vest based on innings pitched, but I don't love it. And I would much prefer Jacob deGrom at the younger age, even with the injury history. Look, there's been nothing that has directly pointed to Jacob deGrom having a type of a chronic injury. This isn't David Wright with spinal stenosis. I think there's the fan angst that leads us to believe that deGrom won't be healthy again, but he finished the season healthy, and the injuries that he had previously were not chronic, debilitating, end your career type injuries. Now, big knock on wood, but the point is, if you could have Jacob deGrom on a big money 4-year deal, or you have to sign Verlander to a 3-year deal, I'd give deGrom that extra year. I would also give deGrom an additional 2 years. I'd give deGrom a 5-year deal before I gave Verlander 3. Let's actually get to the direct age comparison here. So Jacob deGrom is 34 years old. June 19th, 1988. For Verlander, it's February 20th, 1983. So again, by opening day, he will be 40. Jacob deGrom will turn 35 mid-season. So you'd be paying for deGrom's age 34-35 season, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39. You could sign Jacob deGrom to a 5-year deal, and you'd only be getting his age 40 season, I guess, in the final year there. Let me do the math on that again. Starts at 34, starts the next year at 35, starts the following year at 36, starts the following year at 37, 30. So no, not even. It would be his age 39 season, 38 to 39 would be the 5th year of that deal. So by the end of a 5-year contract, Jacob deGrom would be the same age that Justin Verlander is right now. And he just went from, Tommy John surgery in 2020, not pitching in 2021, to throwing 175 innings in the regular season. You tack on, what was in the playoffs, about 20? He pitched, exactly 20. 4 in the wild card round, 6 in the ALCS, 10 in the World Series. So a jump from nothing to 195 innings pitched. I don't know. Do you guys remember how Matt Harvey fared a year after Tommy John surgery? A year after his first year back from Tommy John surgery. Didn't go well. At that age, even though Verlander's a freak of nature, to me, a 3-year deal for Justin Verlander after that big innings jump, that's more concerning than whatever we're looking at with deGrom here. So when it comes to contract and years required, I really can't get on board with it. And then you talk about the money side of it, and if he wants the Scherzer deal, the Mets are the ones that gave that. You can give him an identical contract, right? Paid him $43.3 million a season. That's $86 for those two. Now, granted, deGrom's going to command something similar. But I also think, let's just say you give deGrom a 5-year deal. There's every chance you could get him at 40 or even a little below $40 million. If you're giving him that many years, if you're saying to Jacob deGrom, let's just say it's a $38 million a year contract. You're looking at 190 over 5. Or you could pay Verlander 130 over 3. So you would basically be getting, for deGrom, 2 extra years for an additional $60 million. I think that could prove worth it. So it really just depends on what these guys want, where they want to go. Verlander's market, it seems like the Dodgers are pretty interested. So that's a tough team to compete with for his services. I just wonder how long are the deGrom negotiations going to go? Because part of me thinks the Verlander market could move quicker. And if it does, you're in this weird boat where you don't want to miss out on Verlander. So you have to maybe jump on that, but that would then take you out of the running for deGrom. So it's just weird to try to piece together who's going where at what time. And obviously Rodon's still in that mix as well. But the bottom line here is the Mets have interest in Justin Verlander. Justin Verlander has some interest in going to a team like the Mets. So don't be surprised if it happens. But I also wouldn't necessarily tell you to bank on it either, because I think that returning to the Astros or signing with the Dodgers are probably the two most likely scenarios at this juncture. Yet, you never know with Steve Cohen. We can get a report tomorrow that he's all in on Justin Verlander, like he was all in on Max Scherzer. And then here we are again in this mode where we're trying to figure out if the Mets are going to make this big splash, and it could come out of left field entirely. With that said, Max Scherzer said some interesting things as it relates to his first year with the Mets. I want to go through that in just a minute, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer to esports, they got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find that at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Where will Jacob deGrom land? You can find that at BetOnline, as well as free agents like Aaron Judge, Trey Turner. If you want to place any of those bets or just focus in on football or basketball, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Max Scherzer was on a podcast with, I believe it was John Heyman. And this quote started to make some waves, and I want to read it out to you here. He says, when he got to the Mets, quote, "I got there and fell in love immediately, especially with Billy and Buck in charge. I thought they were great in what they were able to do. I fell in love with the team a lot quicker than I even thought I was going to. Really good dudes, and we had a really good clubhouse. It didn't feel like we had any bad eggs. When you have that kind of chemistry, that's when you go out there and you win." Max Scherzer knows a little thing about winning, and I do wonder when you hear a quote like that, when you see Buck Showalter win the Manager of the Year, and you see kind of the glowing praise from his players. When you hear the quotes from Mark Canha about Jacob deGrom returning, it feels like this is a team that doesn't want to get split up. And why should they? They won 101 games, and I know that they didn't get where they ultimately wanted to go. They didn't win the division, and they had a short stint in the playoffs. That does not mean this team wasn't good enough. And at times, I feel like you can maybe cut off your nose to spite your face a bit, and you try to tinker when you don't have to. Obviously, the bullpen has to get rebuilt, and they're not going to retain all those guys. But if you bring back Brandon Nimmo and Jacob deGrom, you have close to the same team, and with that, you can even bring back Chris Bassett. There's other names on the market. There's Kodai Senga, who I promise you, I'm going to get to him. Most likely we're doing that for Friday's show unless any news breaks. I just want to make sure before I break down a pitcher that I really know nothing about, that I get to watch a little bit of them and actually tell you what I see rather than just reading what someone else wrote on him. But he is an option, and I think you could wonder if he has maybe some more upside, maybe a higher ceiling than a Bassett. But also, Bassett's high floor is very important to the Mets, particularly with Max Scherzer in his late 30s and Jacob deGrom potentially coming back. It would be good to once again know that there is at least some type of an anchor. I know Bassett's not necessarily young in the tooth, but he certainly has found a way to be a durable pitcher over the last 3 years. So I don't really see the problem in running it back. And I know I did a whole podcast on this, but when you read that quote from Scherzer, that means something to me. And who do we always see him around? I saw him around Chris Bassett a lot. We saw him around Jacob deGrom a lot. So bringing those guys back in particular still makes a lot of sense. It could be the best way to solidify this rotation. If the net result of this offseason is you lost Taijuan Walker and you lost like Adam Ottavino or a couple of those arms out of the pen that you would have rebuilt in some shape or form, I think that this team can go out and do exactly what they did this year. And if they win 101 games again, even with the Braves in the division, even with the reigning NL champs in the Phillies, you win 101 games twice, good chance you're going to win the division. So I think, the idea that the Mets are far away and they have to do massive tinkering, I just don't see it. This was a team that was good enough. It's just a matter of bringing the right pieces back into the mix and also knowing that you're going to get a lot more from some of your top prospects with the graduation that we saw at the end of the season of Brett Beatty, Francisco Alvarez, and Mark Vientos. There's a good chance that at least one of those guys is going to be a really high-end, above-average contributor next season. And honestly, I think it's going to be two of them. I think it's going to be Beatty and Alvarez. Beyond that, though, the last part of that quote that I just wanted to focus back in on is where he says, especially with Billy and Buck in charge. I know that every time you see James Click hit the market, the Astros GM who they shockingly let go, or you see David Stearns, any of these big name executives, we're always quick to want the Mets to hire them. And look, if they get any of them to be the president of baseball operations under Billy Epler, you're adding another great baseball mind. It would be good for the Mets. But when it comes to this front office and this organization, how it's run, I do think there is a really good mix with Billy Epler and Buck Showalter. They seem to like to work together. And I think that the franchise is being driven with a steady hand on the wheel that will, one way or another, result in a lot of winning next season. That's going to be all, though, for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. Follow the show, @LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on around sports, with instant game reaction, breaking news, the take of the day. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.